Despite requests for funding for the Israeli military and social welfare, American Jews agreed to support the construction project by purchasing bonds that were guaranteed by the Israeli government. Upon her return to Israel, she suggested an ambitious infrastructure construction initiative to address the unemployment issue, which included restoring roads that had been damaged during the recent conflict. In 1950, she went back to America in search of $15 billion over the next 15 years through government bonds. Once home, she continued to promote Jewish immigration to Israel despite the strains placed on the current state infrastructure. While she worked to advance the Israeli economy, in May 1951, Golda learned that her husband Morris had passed away from a heart attack. Weeks later, her political mentor and trusted advisor, David Remes, also died. Putting these personal hardships aside, Golda dedicated herself to working 19 hours each day to establish a social democratic nation in Israel. In January 1952, she introduced a national insurance program to offer financial assistance to women, children, and the elderly. In spite of opposition from Finance Minister Levi Eshkol, the Minister of Labor succeeded in the proposal. In 1953, she managed to pass a law instituting national service for women in hospitals and schools, although it angered the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. In 1955, when Golda was invited by Ben-Gurion to run as the Mapai candidate for mayor of Tel Aviv, she lost after two conservative Orthodox representatives voted for the incumbent. Even though a ceasefire mediated by the United Nations had been in effect since July 1949, Arab insurgents, or Fedayeen, continued to carry out attacks on Israeli territory. Feeling exasperated by the ongoing incursions, in October 1953, Moshe Dayan, the aggressive chief of operations of the Israeli Defense Forces, dispatched a group of elite troops led by Ariel Sharon to mount a retaliatory strike on the Fedayeen stronghold of Kibbutz in Jordan, resulting in the deaths of 69 civilians. The event led to a series of conflicts between Ben-Gurion and his foreign minister Moshe Sharet, who condemned the excessive use of force by the Israeli Defense Forces. Throughout the power struggle, Ben-Gurion stepped down from the premiership in January 1954 and was succeeded by Sharet, but by late 1955, Ben-Gurion had returned to the position and aimed to strengthen his power. In June 1956, shortly after adopting the Hebrew surname Meir, Golda succeeded Sharet as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, representing Israel on the global stage. In July 1956, Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser declared the nationalization of the Suez Canal, posing a threat to British and French economic interests. When the British and French extended an invitation to Israel to participate in a scheme to militarily take control of the canal, Ben-Gurion eagerly accepted the opportunity, harboring resentment towards Nasser for blocking the canal to Israeli shipping and allowing Palestinian Fedayeen to launch attacks on Israel from Egyptian territory. While Meir participated in the discussions, Moshe Dayan and Shimon Peres from the Ministry of Defense conducted much of the dialogue. The three parties formulated a strategy for Israel to invade Egypt, while Britain and France would intervene under the guise of acting as peacekeepers while achieving their genuine motives for taking control of the canal. The operation commenced on 29 October 1956, and in just 4 days, Israeli forces captured the Gaza Strip and all of the Sinai Peninsula, located to the east of the canal. Despite suffering severe losses, Nasser made the canal impassable by sinking vessels and garnered international sympathy, while both the Soviets and the Americans urged Israeli troops to pull back at the United Nations. At the UN Foreign Minister Golda Meir represented Israel, contending that the Israeli presence in the Sinai Peninsula was a defensive measure after the Fedayeen consistently assaulted Israel from bases in Egypt. Under diplomatic pressure from the United States, Ben-Gurion consented to withdraw from the Sinai in exchange for American acknowledgement of Israel's right to respond to further Fedayeen assaults originating from Egypt. Meir reluctantly delivered a speech at the UN to this effect but felt let down when the Americans did not recognize Israel's right to respond. Following the Suez Crisis, Meir and Ben-Gurion also found themselves at odds regarding their approach to West Germany. While Ben-Gurion pursued economic and military assistance from the Germans, Meir was cautious about engaging a government that still employed numerous former Nazi officials. Over time, as Germany evolved into Israel's second-largest supplier of arms, Meir eventually backed Ben-Gurion's strategy of fostering closer relations with Germany to the point that in 1965, she accepted the appointment of former Nazi officer Ralph Friedman Pauls as German ambassador to Israel. In May 1960, Israel's National Security Agency, Mossad, captured the prominent Nazi official Adolf Eichmann from Argentina, where he had escaped in 1945 after being convicted of war crimes. When Argentina raised concerns with the UN that Israel had breached its sovereignty, Meir provided a robust defense of Israeli actions, claiming that the unlawful incursion was warranted to bring those responsible for the Holocaust to justice. The UN supported her argument, and Eichmann was put on trial and executed in Israel in June 1962. Meir devoted a significant part of her time as foreign minister to fostering connections with newly independent nations in sub-Saharan Africa. Although Meir regarded black Africans as natural partners in the battle against colonialism and ethnic discrimination, the African nations were appreciative of the chance to obtain economic aid from a nation that had not participated in dividing the continent. Meir assisted President Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana in setting up a state shipping business. Israeli construction firms oversaw a public works initiative in Nigeria, and after the Belgians departed the Congo in 1962, she sent Israeli army doctors to help with the lack of medical professionals. While Ben-Gurion was doubtful about his foreign minister's efforts in Africa, Meir defended her initiatives as a way to diminish Arab influence in the area. Meir's focus on Africa was further motivated by a belief that Ben-Gurion perceived diplomacy mainly as a tool for acquiring weapons and depended on officials in the defense ministry, which he managed, to steer his relationships with the world's prominent powers. Not only did Meir view individuals like Dayan and Perez as unnecessarily aggressive, but she also worried that they would stray from the prevailing labor Zionist principles. When Ben-Gurion tried to promote Dayan and Perez to the cabinet in the late 1950s, Meir opposed alongside two seasoned Mapai leaders, Education Minister Zalman Aran and Trade Minister Pinhas Sapir. A lengthy and complicated contention arose between Ben-Gurion and the older guard led by Meir during the early part of the 1960s. Ben-Gurion aimed to initiate a public inquiry regarding the actions of Pinhas Lavin, who was defense minister from 1954 to 1955. Lavin had faced allegations of approving a false flag operation to bomb numerous civilian sites in Egypt, but he denied any awareness and claimed Perez was the person at fault. After being compelled to resign, Lavin sought to vindicate his reputation. When Ben-Gurion suggested a comprehensive judicial inquiry, Meir and the majority of the Mapai leaders objected, appalled at the idea of a leadership conflict unfolding in public. Ben-Gurion stepped down from the premiership in June 1963 and was succeeded by Levi Eshkol, but continued to demand a public probe into the Lavin affair, criticizing his successor in the process. Even though she was in her mid-60s and had recently received a lymphoma diagnosis, Meir spearheaded the effort to obstruct Ben-Gurion from staging a political return. When a terminally ill Moshe Sharet criticized Ben-Gurion for undermining national unity in the Knesset in February 1965, Meir leaned forward and kissed him before launching her own attack on the former prime minister. Ben-Gurion retaliated by establishing a new party, Rafi, which secured 10 seats in the Knesset elections in November. In the meantime, Meir had forged an alliance with the pro-Soviet version of Ardat Ha-Avoda, which had broken away from Mapai in 1944, which garnered a total of 45 seats, driving the final nail into Ben-Gurion's political coffin. After her political triumph, Meir resigned as foreign minister in January 1966 and announced her plan to retire due to health issues. She maintained significant political influence, and within weeks, was invited to take on the role of Secretary General of Mapai, a position she accepted to pursue the unification of the moderate socialist parties into one unified Labour Party. While Eshkol held the title of Prime Minister, Meir was the most powerful political figure in the nation. As the Israeli government worked to recover from the harsh political conflicts of the previous decade, tensions were rising along the Egyptian-Israeli border. On the 16th of May 1967, in reaction to inaccurate Soviet intelligence suggesting an impending Israeli attack, Nasser demanded the withdrawal of the UN peacekeeping force stationed on the Egyptian-Israeli border since the Suez Crisis, intending to replace them with Egyptian troops. Eshkol's government faced challenges in handling the crisis, while conservative opposition leader Menahem Begin allied with Dayan, demanding that Ben-Gurion lead a government of national unity. Eshkol and Meir opposed these efforts but had to consent to a national unity government with Dayan serving as Minister of Defense. On the morning of the 5th of June, Dayan instructed the Israeli Air Force to take action, and within a few hours, over 300 Egyptian aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Over the span of 6 days, Israeli forces regained control of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula and captured the Golan Heights from Syria, Egypt's ally, while East Jerusalem and the West Bank were taken from Jordan. This time, the Israelis were resolute in their refusal to heed UN calls to withdraw their occupation forces. Back in Israel, Meir persisted in her efforts to unite the moderate left, leading to the formation of the Israeli Labour Party in January 1968 after the merger of Mapai, Rafi, and Ardut. After serving as the inaugural General Secretary of the United Party, Meir resigned in August 1968, seemingly determined to retire permanently. To thwart Dayan's aspirations to become Eshkol's successor, Meir appointed former Ardut leader Yigal Allon as Eshkol's deputy prime minister. With Allon and Dayan disputing in the background over the West Bank, Eshkol suffered a heart attack in late 1968 and passed away at the end of February 1969. Understanding that appointing either Allon or Dayan as prime minister could lead to a division in the party, Labour Secretary General Pinhas Sapir invited Meir to take on the role of new prime minister. Acknowledging her declining health, she agreed only after being assured by her doctor that she had another decade to live. Although Dayan and Allon enjoyed significantly greater popularity among the populace, on March 7, the Labour Party's Central Committee voted unanimously in support of Meir, who officially took office on the 17th. Just 2 months shy of her 71st birthday, the woman who had been Ben-Gurion's close confidant in the 1950s before orchestrating his political decline in the 1960s had become the first female head of government in the Western world. In 1968, following the embarrassing loss in the Six-Day War, Nasser initiated the war of attrition by launching missiles from the western bank of the Suez Canal into Israeli-occupied Sinai. As Prime Minister, Meir inherited Eshkol's coalition, which encompassed the entire political spectrum and led to political stalemate. Due to her humility and pragmatic approach, by July, her approval rating surged to 90%, and in October 1969, she directed an alliance of Labour and the left-wing Mapam Party, which secured 56 seats in the Knesset. Despite her socialist inclinations, she found it challenging to navigate the labor conflicts that plagued the nation. While the Israeli economy was projected to grow by 35% from 1969 to 1973, workers' wages did not keep pace with inflation, and all labor unions in the nation were managed by the state through Histadrut. Meir was reluctant to allow Histadrut any level of autonomy from the state, and the Labor Federation disintegrated within 10 years. Her loyalty to socialist ideals of collectivism eroded her backing among the younger liberal individualist segment of society. In March 1971, Meir encountered a public uprising in Jerusalem led by the Black Panthers, a group named after the American civil rights organization, to protest against discrimination faced by Jews from North Africa and the Middle East, who lived at a lesser standard than those of Eastern European descent. The Panthers were frustrated by the fact that the Israeli administration was predominantly comprised of Eastern European Jews, and Meir had previously remarked that Jews who did not speak Yiddish were not authentic Jews. While suppressing the Panthers, Meir sought to defend Eastern European Jews by asserting that they had endured greater hardship and discrimination than other Jews and charged the Panthers with being unpatriotic. The protests persisted throughout the summer, during which the Panthers demanded Meir's resignation and burned her effigy. Despite her earlier opposition to Ben-Gurion on the same topic, Meir now maintained that defense expenditure was crucial and the government could not afford advancements in social welfare. Regardless of the Israeli military's success record, Meir was concerned about Israel's ongoing survival, particularly after the Palestinian Liberation Organization's leader Yasser Arafat, who had taken over from the ailing Nasser as the leader of the Arab cause in 1970, declared that the Arabs aimed for the destruction of the State of Israel. Although Meir sought to negotiate a diplomatic resolution with her Arab neighbors, they refused to engage in discussions unless the Israelis first withdrew to their pre-1967 boundaries. Naturally, Meir was unwilling to relinquish her bargaining advantages even before talks had commenced. Disenchanted by the UN peace process, the Americans and Soviets worked to formulate a solution for the Middle East. Neither superpower desired for the Cold War to escalate, and US President Richard Nixon was eager to enhance relations with the Soviets. Meir perceived that these peace initiatives would not yield significant results as long as the Arabs remained resolved to eliminate Israel from the global map. In December 1969, Nixon's Secretary of State William Rogers revealed a peace plan based on Israeli withdrawal from all occupied territories in exchange for an Egyptian assurance of non-belligerency. Meir opposed Rogers' ambiguous proposals and directed her ambassador to Washington, Yitzhak Rabin, to rally the American Jewish lobby against it. The Israeli rejection was accompanied by bombing raids into the Egyptian interior, prompting the Soviets to boost their arms shipments to Egypt. By the end of July 1970, Meir hesitantly accepted Rogers' proposal for a 90-day ceasefire along with UN mediation, yet her confidence in the Americans was shaken when Israeli intelligence revealed that Nasser had exploited the ceasefire to position a Soviet anti-aircraft missile system on the western bank of the Suez Canal. When urged to display more flexibility, accusing the Americans especially of compromising Jewish security for their diplomatic interests. As she took her resolute stance, she allied more closely with her defense minister and former adversary, Moshe Dayan. The Prime Minister admitted her lack of knowledge in military matters and depended on advice from the well-liked general, while the Defense Minister valued the political skills of Israel's matriarch. This concludes the second part of the documentary. If you enjoyed it, stay tuned for the third part. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and inspiring. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know what topics you'd like to see next.